A few months ago, I watched a guy give a presentation about why so many people are currently leaving churches. One of his main reasons is that we now have so much free access to information. As recently as a few decades ago, people's pastors were the most educated speakers they had the chance to listen to. And for some, their only source of complete, articulately expressed ideas. But now, when Google lets us instantly fact-check and contextualize the sermons we just heard, religion starts to come off poorly. And that makes sense. In this age of unprecedented literacy, it's pretty natural for well-informed adults to start questioning the existence of an invisible, all-powerful Bronze Age war god. In fact, when you think about it, the rise of atheism doesn't seem all that mysterious at all. But that's not a satisfying answer to Christians, who probably tend to chafe at the implication that their religion withers in the face of open information. So for a second opinion, let's see what this fellow has to say on the subject.
Well, last week we talked about one of the unspoken fruits of Mormonism, atheism. And we said that not believing in God is often the result of people buying into an errant LDS teaching that it is the only true church on the face of the earth, and then discovering that they have been lied to. This often leads them to being so burned in their heart that they have come to hate and even renounce God altogether.
Oh, I see. So it's not a question of healthy skepticism. No. People are becoming atheists because Mormons make them hate God. This guy's off to a humdinger of a start, isn't he? I bet he has all kinds of intelligent things to tell us about why we're atheists.
Additionally, we mentioned two facts that the atheists ought to consider. The first was that atheism is a faith.
No, it isn't.
It's a faith in no God. It requires an extraordinary amount of belief in no God.
Let me ask you something, sir. Do you have faith in no fire-breathing dragons? Do you have faith that the Galactic Empire isn't hiding a Death Star behind the moon? You would probably argue against the phrasing of these questions, because not believing something does not take faith. And the fact that this guy is saying otherwise suggests one of two things about him. One, he's an idiot who can't comprehend what it means to disbelieve in something. Or two, he has no intention of joining the larger conversation on this topic, but is instead pandering to predisposed believers who want to misunderstand healthy skepticism. And to please them, I'm guessing he'll reach into his grab bag of trusty but dusty old preacher's favorites and pull out at least two of the following, just to show how strong our atheist faith must be. 1. The odds against evolution, possibly illustrated by a tornado through a junkyard or a monkey at a typewriter. 2. The idea that it's crazy to think the universe just came from nothing. 3. A fine-tuning argument, possibly illustrated by the idea of finding a watch on a beach. 4. Assertions of biblical prophecies being fulfilled, or proposed historical references to Jesus. And 5. The fact that atheists can't look everywhere at once, so it takes faith to say there's not a God somewhere out there. I'm writing this as I watch, so I honestly don't know which of these he's going to cover. But come on, we all know he's going to get to some of them.
The second fact we discussed was in reference to the atheist claims that belief in God usually equates to bloodshed and violence historically and even present day. They'll cite 9/11 as example of that. Regarding this, we illustrated that atheistic governments were far more inclined to inhumane governance than theistic ones.
First off, no, they weren't. Many totalitarian communist regimes of the 20th century were brutal to be sure. But to say they were more brutal than the worst totalitarian theocracies, whether Islamic ones today, the Christian ones of the last 1,000 years, or the rampaging Israelite warlords of the Bible, is absurd. As far as it's not flatly untrue, the assertion relies on various forms of hair-splitting to assure believers that their brand of evildoer is not as evil as the other brands of evildoer. And let's be clear about something. Measuring victims by number does not clarify anything. The only reason Hitler and Stalin killed more people than biblical maniacs like Joshua or David is that they had 20th century populations, infrastructure, and technology at their disposal. And second, communist regimes have nothing to do with atheism in any meaningful sense. Now I know Christians will bristle at this, but a simple thought experiment will make it clear why. Imagine a country started killing everybody who didn't believe in the tooth fairy. You, I presume, do not believe in the tooth fairy. But would you feel your lack of belief was at all delegitimized by this government's atrocities? Would you feel you were stained by or needed to apologize for its actions? No. On the contrary, I'm sure you would be irritated by anybody who tried to lump you together with this government just because you and they happen to share a mundane, commonplace lack of belief in something silly. You would know they were wrong to kill people just for holding a childish belief, but you would nonetheless continue to recognize that the belief was childish. And it wouldn't matter that every organized atrocity in the history of humankind has been committed by governments that did not believe in the tooth fairy. I still doubt you would either connect this violence to their lack of said belief, or start to think that tooth fairyism's relatively low murder rate places it on a higher moral ground. I've already given this stupid argument more attention than it deserves, so from now on, let's just agree that you won't try saddling me with communists, and I won't try saddling you with the Crusades. Deal?
Tonight, I'd like to give those who ardently believe and know God a few more points to consider. Next week, we will return. We're going to pick up and finalize polygamy, how it ended, and then we're going to go into more modern-day Mormonism from that point forward. The first thing the smug atheist arguments say about God and believers in God...
Whoa there, big fella. Are you sure you've made it clear enough how your audience is supposed to feel about us?
...is that he is a big crutch. That Nietzsche's Superman, or what Nietzsche called the Übermensch, would never need to buy into such a myth like that. Borrowing from such proud ideologies made popular by men like Feuerbach and Nietzsche, Karl Marx quipped one of the most famous lines about people who believe, saying, "Religion is the opiate for the masses." In other words, us masses want there to be a God to quell our fears from lightning and thunder in nature, to protect us from the unknown, to comfort us from the guilt and shame we carry around, and to pacify us in the dark face of the inevitable, death. I would suggest that there is a tremendous amount of truth to what Feuerbach and Nietzsche and Marx had to say. But by agreeing, I also want to ask, so what? What's wrong with human beings wanting a source of spiritual comfort in the face of their sins and failures? What's wrong with giving allegiance to a power and source that is reliable and unshakable and trustworthy and kind?
If that source is imaginary, then the problem is that it's imaginary. And reliance on it clouds people's ability to intelligently deal with and make restitution for their shortcomings.
Is an atheist a better human being, a stronger human being, a more loving human being?
No. Some atheists are great people. Others are jerks. I don't agree with or even like all people who disbelieve in God, any more than you agree with or like everybody who shares your disbelief in the tooth fairy.
Because they embrace the faith of denial over an individual who chooses to make him or herself accountable to a living God? I would suggest where atheists call theists' belief in God a crutch.
As for Christians, I'm not going to insult them by presuming to know their motivations, then paint them all as using their religion as a crutch. I mean, what kind of asshole would be so presumptuous as to tell a whole group of people why they believe what they believe?
That the atheist denial of God is motivated by a fear of accountability.
Oh, so you're that kind of asshole.
Tell me, what is more convenient philosophically for the adulterer, the murderer, the liar, and the thief? To deny the existence of God and thereby remove the fear of retribution for his crimes, or to embrace the notion of God and therefore live each day with the inevitable consequences of the actions they have taken? The bottom line, atheism and all of its forms becomes the vehicle by which men and women are able to ignore, renounce, or hide from the consequences of their actions. It's the best cop-out on earth with the worst consequences.
Let's take a moment to appreciate what this jackass is telling us. Basically, atheists choose not to believe in God, and they do so just because they want to run around doing things that might lean toward or even include acts like rape, murder, and theft. Sure, I may have called him a jackass, but at this point he's just stopped debating, and his presentation has devolved into a childish attack on our character. His insinuations are more deeply disrespectful than any name I could call him, And what's worse, they're deliberately designed to poison his followers with that same disrespect. And not only is this line of argument insulting, but it makes no sense. Atheism does not spare me from accountability. I live my life restraining my actions for a variety of reasons, largely out of consideration for and accountability to my fellow human beings. I gave up belief in God as a sincere acknowledgement that there was no evidence for his existence, not out of some weird desire to misbehave. And your insinuation to the contrary is the most irrelevant and condescending form of insult I could imagine being passed from one adult to another. I just finished saying I won't presume to instruct you on your own motivation for believing in God. Please return the favor, and don't presume to tell me why I don't believe in God. Asshole.
The Polish poet Czesław Miłosz To me, a stated faith in no God is about as egocentric a statement that could ever be made, and it's submitted to the idea that the speaker who says there is no God has experienced and seen everything. There is no God. How do they know? Have they examined the entire world? Have they looked under every rock to find him? So when they say there is no God, there's a tacit belief there that they have looked at everything. It's so egocentric because, of course, they haven't. But for some reason, atheists believe that he doesn't exist without having seen a teaspoon of evidence.
So what is evidence that something does not exist? Chew on that for a second and appreciate what utter nonsense this guy is spinning. This argument is based on such a fundamental misunderstanding of how anybody ever comes to believe in anything that I'm surprised even apologists lower themselves to the point of using it. To grasp its stupidity, all you have to do is apply it to anything other than God. Do you have to scour every inch of the universe to conclude that fairies don't exist? Magic flying unicorns? Fire-breathing dragons? And is your disbelief in them cemented in the idea that you've seen and experienced everything? No. You may not say with 100% certainty that you know they aren't out there somewhere, but considering the fact that you've never seen any of these things before, that they generally violate your observed understanding of how the world works, and that they all smack of having mythic origins, you pretty much ignore the slim possibility until you find some kind of evidence for them. And that's all we atheists do with the idea of an all-powerful, disembodied intelligence that we can't see or hear. Is that not reasonable? This is really basic stuff, and Christians know very well how to apply this thought process to anything other than their God. I don't have to disprove God with 100% certainty before I can tell him to wait in line with fairies, unicorns, and dragons until he decides to show himself.
And by the way, this argument cannot be flipped on those who say there is a God. All the evidence does not need to be examined for a person to see that God exists, any more than a microscopic examination needs to be taken of Donald Trump's body to see if he exists. A couple evidences of him there prove it. But in order to categorically deny that Donald Trump exists, a person would have to literally examine the entire universe to make sure he wasn't hiding somewhere. Do you understand that?
Yes, I understand that very well. Thanks for checking to see if I was keeping up. But it's a fucking stupid analogy. We are, quite unfortunately in my opinion, presented with daily evidence of Trump's existence. Not only that, but he's a human being. And as we see humans all around us every day, we have little reason to question whether one more exists. Trump, as you say, is not hiding somewhere. God, on the other hand, is in the habit of never ever appearing to us and is vastly different from everything else in our experience. By grasping at such a desperate comparison, you reveal just how little proof you have for your God. Leads us to a final criticism atheists heap upon believers today. Yes, we heap accusations upon believers. It's what we do. For example, we tell them that they dishonestly choose their beliefs because they have wicked hearts and just want to sin.
That Christianity is a leap into an unfounded chasm of unsubstantiated claims, and that science has disproved the evidence for God. Enter Richard Dawkins, atheist extraordinaire and author of The God Delusion.
I think it would be more appropriate to call Dr. Richard Dawkins a biologist extraordinaire who happened to get tired of religious people denying science.
Dawkins ignorantly and consistently insists that faith in God is the process of non-thought, that believers in God possess, quote, blind trust in the absence of evidence.
Well, don't they? Let me guess. You're going to equivocate on the "you think I have no evidence and I think you have no evidence" thing, hinting at the idea that there's evidence for Christianity somewhere out there, but never actually showing us what that evidence is. But that's really all an apologist has to do, right? As long as he hints to his audience that the proof is there and that some atheist extraordinaire is just being closed-minded for ignorantly denying it, they'll all go home feeling better about themselves and their faith without feeling any compunction whatsoever to investigate this so-called evidence or to question whether it actually exists.
While Dawkins' inflammatory accusations may carry weight against some so-called faith-based religions like Mormonism, where people believe in books and claims that have absolutely no evidentiary basis.
Oh, of course. All the silly false religions like Mormons don't have evidence, but Christians sure do.
He is truly guilty of his own accusation of non-thought when it comes to biblical Christianity. Great 20th century Christian thinkers like Wolterstorff, Plantinga, Swinburne, and C.S. Lewis, to name a few, have made robust intellectual cases for faith and have helped true Christians the world over to see that God does not expect us to blindly embrace his claims or the claims of every piker that steps up to a pulpit.
Do you assume Mormons have no such thinkers making similarly great strides in justifying their beliefs? You're more familiar with the writings of Christian apologists because 1, they're in your in-group and you enjoy reading them to bolster your faith, and 2, Protestant Christianity is more pervasive within our society than Mormonism. To more vividly help you understand this, I would refer you to the story of the time my brother's youth group went to convert Mormons with what they thought was an open and shut case for evangelical Christianity, only to discover how convincing members of another religion can be.
Several years ago, when I was a young Pentecostal youth group member, I was really disappointed when I had learned that I just missed the boat on a missions trip to Salt Lake City. Our youth pastor, we'll call him Jeremy, got us so charged up on the correctness of Christianity and the wrongness of Mormonism that we thought we could bring the fire of God to Utah and start saving some souls. The trip took place without me, and the results blew my mind. At one point in the trip, Jeremy had a brilliant idea. He thought, hey, since God is on our side, then we should be able to walk right into the Salt Lake Temple and convert the top Mormon leadership. So they gathered their courage and attempted to do just that. Jeremy was pleasantly surprised to find that not only was his group admitted into the temple, but they were additionally led right up to the top where they were given the opportunity to present to some top church officials. Jeremy was awestruck and filled with joy as the church leaders allowed his group to sing Christian songs and praise God out loud, speaking in tongues. As their voices echoed, he realized, hey, we're doing it. This is nothing short of a miracle. Finally, a high-ranking Mormon evangelist, we'll call him Eli, offered to answer any questions that Jeremy and his kids might have. This part did not end up going so well. After several failed attempts to pin him down and get him to admit to a contradiction between the Book of Mormon and the Bible, one youth asked what she thought would be a damning question. She said, "Do you believe that Jesus is the only Son of God?" Eli made a calculated pause before responding. You see, we were all taught that Mormons believed that Satan and Jesus were brothers, and that Satan had defected in a fit of rage because Yahweh chose Jesus' plan for humanity over his. Eli finally responded. "Yes," he said, "I do believe that Jesus is the only Son of God. And I believe that Jesus died for our sins so that we could all be with God in heaven if we would only accept him as such." He turned on the emotions. The power of his voice was almost hypnotic. "I also believe that the Church of Jesus Christ has suffered, but that it was restored to its fullness when the Lord God anointed Joseph Smith with the power of Jesus' blood." As he went on, Jeremy started to realize that he was in way over his head, and if he didn't act now, Eli might actually convert some of his flock to Mormonism. And so he cracked, "Everybody get up! We're getting out of here! Let's go!" And so in disgrace, my fellow youth group members quickly left the building. They went back to their hotel to regroup and try to figure out what to make of what had just happened.
It's clear, if you ever step outside your little bubble and hear what others have to say, that the same tricks of self-persuasion that keep you believing in your God are employed just as effectively by members of all religions all around the world. Before moving forward, I want to rewind and listen to part of this again.
Great 20th century Christian thinkers like Wolterstorff, Plantinga, Swinburne, and C.S. Lewis, to name a few, have made robust intellectual cases for faith and have helped true Christians the world over to see that God does not expect us to blindly embrace his claims.
Now, if proof for God is so evident in the world, then why do true Christians need these great thinkers to help understand the rationale for his existence? According to you, God not only exists, but he can choose to make his existence as obvious as he wants. So why does he rely on great thinkers to weave elaborate arguments for the benefit of those who are lucky enough to hear these arguments and thus become convinced he's real? Why so badly fail people who will never read C.S. Lewis, who may not be able to comprehend his writings, or who are simply not convinced by them? Think about it. If evidence for God relies on a bunch of pseudo-intellectual babble from what sounds like articulate hucksters, then it's probably nothing but pseudo-intellectual babble from articulate hucksters.
God himself in his own words tells us, through the prophet Isaiah, "Come now, let us reason together." Paul told us to earnestly contend for the faith, which was once given to the saints, and Paul called the Bereans in the book of Acts more noble because they received the word of God with readiness of mind, right? And searched the scriptures daily to see what was told them was true or not.
Yeah, and Jesus also extols the virtues of blind faith, at one point saying, "Blessed are those who have not seen and have yet believed." Nice cherry picking, dude.
You find me a true Christian, and I will show you a man or a woman who will reasonably seek and explore all truth, no matter how hard it is to hear, embrace, and even incorporate into their Christian walk. But you show me a true atheist, and I will show you one of the most closed-minded people you have ever met.
Yes, exactly. Atheists are closed-minded, and Christians are the ones who eagerly seek out and absorb information. That's why atheists live in constant fear of having their faith in their religion shaken. That's why atheists feel the need to isolate their kids in a homeschool or atheist private school setting and are constantly discussing the nationwide problem of their children growing up to leave the atheist faith in droves. That's why atheists avoid reading the Bible for fear of coming to believe in God, while Christians would be completely undaunted by sitting around a table with their families and reading Dawkins, Harris, or Hitchens. That's why atheists feel threatened by the facts revealed by cutting-edge science, while Christians rush out to embrace these observations, totally at peace in the knowledge that they will never conflict with their Holy Scripture. Do I need to keep doing this? Because I can go on forever. Look, we all know this is the most ridiculously transparent projection. When I was a Christian, I lived with constant tension over how my faith conflicted with scientific fact or even common sense. Yet since becoming an atheist, I felt the refreshing freedom that comes from being able to read or investigate anything without fear that it will upend my deeply held, cherished beliefs, because I'm no longer trying to keep demonstrable nonsense balanced at the back of my mind. And if anything does challenge me, who cares? Now, the lifelong learning that comes from constantly challenging my perceptions is the whole point anyway, and I'm free to enjoy the journey.
Atheists often equate the theist's belief in God with the belief in Santa Claus or the Tooth Fairy. This accusation, too, is weighted in the balance and found wanting. I stopped believing in the Tooth Fairy when I was about 6, and I stopped believing in Santa Claus by the time I was 7 because I started thinking and reasoning about the proposition of a fat man fitting down the chimney of every home in the world on the same night and said, no, that doesn't work.
I love how you declare an idea weighted in the balance and found wanting, then by way of explanation offer us nothing but an anecdote about how you quit believing in Santa Claus but still believe in God. Look, it's great that you grew the skeptical faculties to ask these questions about Santa Claus, It's too bad your faith blocked you from asking similar questions about a talking snake, a man who fit down a whale's throat and survived in its belly, and a God who had to sacrifice himself to appease his own bloodlust before he could forgive us.
Atheists stopped believing in God because they stopped reasoning at some sad point in their lives and gave into the notion, the egotistical notion, that they have seen it all.
Which none of us ever say.
Hand in hand with the false claim that Christians don't have a sound core intelligence with their faith comes the relentless claim that science has all but decimated the archaic notions of God. Has science proven anything of God's non-existence by exploring the structure of space, the universe, the galaxy, the solar system, or Earth? It's only supported it in my position.
Yes. Science has firmly supported the idea that the Earth is a flat disk covered by a dome that keeps a giant ocean from falling on us, and that the sun, moon, and stars are all small objects that sit upon that dome. Yep, for sure in your position.
Has science proven anything at all about there not being a divine power by discovering DNA or the cell or examining the construct of a simple rose? Can science explain the origins of our seasons, of billions of stars and planets in a single galaxy, which is one of a trillion other galaxies? Can it tell us how we have the diversity of foods, about the wonders of music, about the variety of our fingerprints or the snowflake?
Yes, science explains all those things. And you aren't doing your audience any favors by suggesting they should be mystified by such well-understood concepts.
Take a computer, break it down into its smallest component parts, take it out into the desert and scatter it there. How many billion years will it take for that computer to put itself back together? How many? A trillion years? How many? A billion trillion years? Or will it never happen? Sit 1,000 monkeys behind a typewriter and have them all sit there all day for however long it takes and replace them as they die. How long will it take those 1,000 monkeys at typewriters to rewrite Shakespeare's Hamlet? How long? A billion years? Ever? It'll never happen.
Yes, that's right. It would never happen. And who cares if it would never happen? Because such randomness is nothing like the environmentally driven, self-correcting process of evolution. All this proves is that you have no concept of how biology or cosmology work, and that like too many other pastors, you think whipping out a dank old creationist analogy is a substitute for actually learning about science. Go down to your community college and take a Biology 101 class. Then, after that, take another science class, and another science class. Keep doing it until you have your PhD in biology. Then get behind a podium and talk like a scientific expert.
And yet they insist there's no creative intelligence, there's no creative design, there is no God behind this wonderful universe. Look at the simple cell of our bodies. You guys have denied it because you've been burned. He is there and he speaks to you.
He most certainly does not.
But you deny it because you love the darkness more than light, and you egocentrically love what Milosh called that sweetness of nihilism.
Boy, you presume to tell me a lot of things about myself, don't you, you insulting piece of shit?
Can science ever tell us why we're here, where we're going? Can science ever tell us why we love, why humans forgive in this barbaric world, why things happen like that, or the beauty of language in children and babies? God is whether people believe it or not.
Yes. Some things are pretty, and the only way to account for that is God. You're barely even using your imagination at this point. Now listen, you're almost at the end of the video. Are you going to remember the obligatory part about how you used to be an atheist, but then realized it was better to believe in God?
Having been one who once deconstructed him into an almost nihilistic position, I can tell you that believing in God is far superior to believing in no God.
Oh, there you go. Well played. So let's see, what kind of smack is these atheists talking about Pastor Shawn? First one says, there is absolutely nothing wrong with giving allegiance to those things, given that they exist. If they do not exist, who will stand up for... Look, they do exist, so what's your point? I ain't even gonna finish reading this. What do we got next? Unlike Christians, atheists do not believe in guilt-be-gone incantations. What? Incantations don't make your guilt be gone. Jesus getting killed by Jews and us having a bath in his blood makes our guilt be gone. We ain't magicians, we're Christians. Geez, hopefully the next one's a little better. Option 3. Grow up and take some responsibility for how your actions impact others. They can't impact God. Yeah? Well, God sure will impact you. Just wait till you wake up one day after you're dead. Then you'll see. Unbelievable. So next we have, I haven't checked under every rock for pink unicorns either, but think it's pretty safe to say he'd agree with me that we could rule them out at this point. Well, duh. That's 'cause pink unicorns is stupid. Next. Do Thor, Zeus, or Superman exist? Have you checked the entire universe? No, I haven't checked the entire universe, but I know someone who has. Do you? No? Well, then why don't you get an ultimate source of knowledge and then try arguing with me then? Next. How convinced would you be if I quoted the Quran or the Rig Vedas at you? Well, why should I be convinced? The Quran and the Rig Vedas ain't the Bible now, are they? Idiot. All right, now let's do one more. My brain's about to explode from all this stupidity. Wow. You know, Pew Research has shown that atheists are generally the most well-versed in religious knowledge. Is that the mark of closed-mindedness? Yeah, well, I done plenty of researching from the pew, and 100% of the time my pastor says atheists is degenerate perverts. He also said knowledge puffeth up. So see what good it done you? I don't have time for any more of this. They all just want to sin anyway, so what's the point?